unexpected ones as well. Bendigo and Adelaide's the best performer on that. Chart adds over 2%.
Toyota actually has proven that good public communication can actually help a brand's reputation even in the direst of situations.
Yeah, just think back a few months and all that dreadful PR news on staff cutbacks, unions up in arms, the government subsidy link alongside all of that, and still top spot on the 2013 Corporate Reputation Index from AMR today.
For more on the big movers on the index, AMR's Managing Director Oliver Freedman joins us now from our Melbourne studio. Oliver, thank you very much. We were quite intrigued to see not only Toyota doing well, but car makers consistently actually performing well when it comes to reputation of corporates.
Absolutely. I think, for Toyota, it really shows that a company can go through some really difficult times. And if you manage those difficult times well, the company will trust you, the population out there in Australia will trust you really well and allow you to maintain and even build your reputation. And for those other car companies, it shows that as a country, we'll support them. And I think part of the coverage of what they're doing and helping the Australian economy has really aligned with what Australians are looking for in companies out there.
And yet, Oliver, you go through a list of recalls, doubts over financial performance, staff layoffs, and bigger picture issues facing this industry. It seems that people's only kind of consolation is that they're still in business. Is that enough to push them higher?
Yeah, I think, when you look at those recalls, what's interesting is many of them were for a very small number of vehicles, and some of them hardly any within Australia. And again, it's that importance of honesty and transparency out there that, for a company like Toyota, they made a decision that if there was to be a recall, they'd do it very publicly and very clearly and very quickly. And we see from the drivers of reputation, that's exactly what companies have to do when they're hit with an issue. And if you've built up that reputation over time, it allows you to maintain it even when those difficulties arise.
Particularly probably for watchers of business news, it's really interesting to see the results of how the banks actually have ranked in this reputation index. Just the fact that there is starting to be some differentiation between the four majors.
Absolutely. Having tracked this since back in 2000, so many people have said over the time there's just no way any of those big four can ever differentiate between themselves. And what we've seen is both NAB and CBA really start to improve their reputation. It takes time, and they've done that, I think, by saying this is what we stand for, whether it's the CAN campaign and building customer satisfaction for CBA, or whether it's for NAB saying we're going to break up, we're going to be transparent, we're going to cut our fees. And that really has helped lift them, whereas ANZ and Westpac continue to sit really down at the bottom of the list.
And yet, leaving them all out in the cold, Bendigo and Adelaide somehow vaults above them. Now, where was the big campaign to get them into the spotlight?
Well, I think their big campaign was long ago when they made a stand and said, even though the big banks are shutting down in rural Australia, we're going to be there for the community as a whole, and we're going to make sure we open branches and look after all of Australia. So that citizenship area, that being there to help the community, has held them in extremely good stead over a very long period of time, and they've really maintained that top 20 ranking over 6, 7, 8 years now.
Can we talk innovation, Oliver? Because, intriguingly, you've seen Apple, at least Apple Australia, coming down on this latest list of rankings, but alongside it, in the media space, Fairfax has risen, for which you would say a shift from broadsheet to tabloid has worked in their favour on the innovation front. That seems a kind of a slightly thin bow to draw.
Now, remember that Apple's still ranked up in the top 10 and Fairfax is ranked towards the bottom. So we're not saying that people see Fairfax as more innovative than Apple. I think what Apple did is set an extremely high bar for themselves. And what they've done over the past couple of years is, I read an interesting thought, it's novelty versus innovation. What they've done is added some features to the iPad that we know, the iPhone that we know, whereas they haven't really changed. They haven't created something that has really dramatically changed the way we interact with those iProducts. Fairfax, on the other hand, had done very little innovation over the last multiple years. And I think what the community saw there was, OK, we're going to attempt to do something very different. We're going to change the way that you read those broadsheets and really change them into an easier way to read them, whether it be on the train or whether it be at home, and actually make an attempt to adjust and be more innovative. So for Fairfax, what it did was actually say, we are making a change. We're going to try and improve our reputation that way. And other research we showed saw that people aware of it actually really liked that change.
Yeah, it's funny, I guess, because if you think of the extra iPhone, by what you're saying, consumers are now saying, well, that's just novelty, whereas changing the way you read a newspaper is considered complete innovation. Yeah. Again, it seems quite a stretch, doesn't it?
Well, I guess if you ask people to describe those broadsheets, whether it be the Herald or the Age, really, what was integral to those was the broadsheet status of those newspapers. And so while it is just changing the format that we read it, it was actually saying we're going to adapt. We realise times have changed since 100-odd years ago, and it said we're here and we're ready to look at alternatives that previously would have, I think, been thrown out of the discussion around the table, probably at Fairfax.
And ironically, the link is surely with Apple, because but for its existence, we wouldn't even be talking about a need to downsize, because it's all heading to tablets.
Well, I think that's right. And look, for Apple, there's no doubt they're still seen as very innovative. They still rank right up there on innovation. The question is, can they adjust? I mean, we read stories about flexi mobiles and iWatches and all things like that. I guess the question is, what can they do? What's the next thing they're going to bring out? And one of their challenges is that since the passing of Steve Jobs, there are questions, I think, that arise among the public. Was he really the key to their innovation? And what can they do now that he's obviously no longer here with us?
Any other notable... I mean, you could pick out anything here. There's a couple of interesting reads on the airlines, Australia Post managing to hold on to its spot perhaps better than, say, Apple. What did you find most interesting?
There are probably 2 or 3 of them. I think Qantas was interesting. Obviously, they're continuing to recover from the shutdown and their massive drop in reputation 18 or so months ago. However, Virgin continues to lead them. Interesting to see that those people responsible for reputation, corporate affairs, are now becoming profiled. I think there was a story on Olivia Worth in the Australian magazine over the weekend. Really, the people responsible for reputation are no longer sitting behind closed doors, but actually, key people in an organisation. I think Bupa's a very interesting example. Here's a company, a brand that didn't exist a couple of years ago, and they took some of our really well-trusted health insurance companies and were able to create not only awareness but a strong reputation, and they sit up there in the top half. And finally, I think we have to come back to Telstra, who traditionally sat right down the bottom of the list, and having really had a focus on the customer, saying we're going to care about the community, we're going to focus on it, have been able to build their reputation through a refreshing of their brand, and clearly their stock price has followed that, with reputation rising as their stock price over the past couple of years or so.
Still in the bottom half, it has to be said, with Optus literally almost, but not literally, but snapping at its heels, because it's right behind it. We've got to move on. Oliver, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Dr. Oliver Freedman there from AMR. Take a little bit of a break. Yeah.
When we come back from the break, we'll